All right. Welcome to the Default Profitable Podcast, the show where we dive deep into actual strategies behind starting and building a consistently profitable business. Whether you're a founder, a sales leader, or just a curious builder starting to dream, this podcast is a toolkit for making profit a default setting, not a lucky outcome. I'm your host, Matt Nettleton, and today my guest is Nate Littlewood with Future Ready CFO. Nate, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Matt. It's great to be here. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, we haven't really talked, so why don't you take a minute or two, introduce yourself to the people before we start talking about your business?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm a fractional CFO, which basically means that I work with a bunch of different startup founders and help them with their finances. My focus or specialty is really in the e-commerce and consumer product space. And essentially what I do is help bring clarity and understanding to a startup's finances and show founders how to utilize and leverage their financial statements to make better decisions about the future, make smarter, strategy choices. And the end of the day, it's ultimately about helping them, grow faster, grow more profitably. And a big part is just helping them sleep better at night as well and be less stressed about the numbers.
All right. So when did you start the business?
So I started the business a couple of years ago and have been steadily growing since then. I guess the backstory here is that prior to doing this, I spent about 6 or 7 years running my own e-commerce business. So I've been in the trenches and I know what it's like to be untangling, Shopify payout reports and, stressing about how to finance your next purchase order. I lived that for, 6 or 7 years myself. Along the way, I was also a lead mentor at a New York-based accelerator program called Food Future Co. That program has unfortunately since been wound down, but what we did is get early-stage founders in the food, beverage, and ag tech space, basically get them ready for their first round of institutional investment. Prior to my foray into the startup world, which is, I guess, about a decade ago now, I spent the first half of my career working on Wall Street at an investment bank. So that was kind of how I, became familiar with the world of finance. And I guess you could say that what I do now is combining that, pretty deep finance experience with firsthand knowledge and experience actually, building, owning and operating businesses in the e-com space.
So what was it that was going on Wall Street that made you wake up one morning and say, hey, I'm going to open an e-commerce business?
That's a great question. I'd say it wasn't so much about what was going on in Wall Street. It was this niggling voice in the back of my own head that was starting to ask myself questions about, things like purpose, legacy, and impact, which I've since come to understand are, pretty core values of mine. And, I was getting paid very well. I was getting, sent all over the world to do it. But I, was starting to think about getting married and kids and so forth. And I was like, what am I going to tell my kids that I've done with my life up until this point? And, no disrespect to bankers and Wall Street guys, but I just didn't feel comfortable with the story that I was going to be able to tell. I mean, when you distilled it down, essentially what I was doing is helping make rich people richer. And I was like, I don't really want that on my tombstone. And I would like to carve out a path for myself that's a bit more, meaningful and have more of an impact here. So that, I guess, was the catalyst to leave Wall Street. What happened next was an exploration, really just, honestly, I went back to square one. I said, let's assume for a minute that every career decision I've made up until this point has been, I don't know, a mistake or, at best questionable. Let's strip this back and kind of think about what is the stuff that I'm actually passionate about and good at and enjoy doing, like what energizes me. And I very quickly became focused on kind of building things and entrepreneurship and designing things. I became very focused on food, which had been a lifelong kind of passion and interest of mine, and on sustainability. And the startup that I subsequently went on to, launch in 2017 or so was really aimed at exploring, the intersection of those three spaces and doing some meaningful work in that area.
And so, yeah, I think we're on episode 170 maybe.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm,
when I talk to people about, so what's the one thing that you really had to learn that you didn't understand before you started?
mm,
There is a far and away answer, and that
mm-hmm.
is financial business acumen
Yeah,
versus financial household acumen.
right, right.
Now you're coming from Wall Street. You have a super deep
Yep,
background in finance. Presumably, you
mm-hmm,
understand business finance.
yep.
When you started up your e-commerce site, what are some of the things that like you didn't realize you would have to learn to make the business functional?
Mm. Yeah, so you're right. Like the finance, analytics, operations, number crunching side of things was always relatively easy to me.
Yep.
The part of it that I struggled was, a lot of the more customer facing stuff, like coming up with ad creatives, figuring out value propositions for people to buy product, and the whole social media side of things was just very much out of my wheelhouse. I enjoyed learning about it, and I certainly learned a lot about it over the years, but I cannot claim to have ever reached, mastery stage at that sort of stuff. And looking back at, my time in the CEO, founder or co-founder seat, I now recognize that that was not actually the right seat for me to be in, right? There's a lot of part of that scope that I frankly, with the benefit of hindsight, realized that I'm not that good at, and I really didn't enjoy that much. And so my subsequent progression from a CEO founder to now a CFO is really my attempt at saying, okay, screw all the stuff I don't like. I don't want to have to worry about branding and marketing and running ads and sales and all that sort of stuff. I just want to do the numbers, right? And I can do the numbers really well. And I am a much better chance to have an impact in this world and leave the sort of legacy I want to leave if I can just double down on the stuff that I'm really good at and sell that as a service and let other people worry about the parts of running these businesses that I don't like and I don't enjoy.
So it's interesting. You're the first person that really has basically talked that clearly about understanding the finances. Um, but it's also interesting, and this is a theme that has come up over and over again. If
Mm,
you're not really in the business that you say you're in until you learn how to sell the business that you say
mhm,
you're in, right?
mhm, mhm,
So it sounds
mhm.
like one of the things that you didn't like was selling the e-commerce platform, but it sounds like one of the things you are comfortable with is selling your services as a fractional CFO.
Correct. Correct. Yes, I absolutely understand. I can craft the value proposition for doing what I do now. To give you a little more context on the e-commerce business, it was basically like an indoor urban gardening business, right? We were selling products to help people grow their own food in an urban environment. Now, I went into this with fairly grandiose, ambitions. I was very concerned and distressed about some of the things I'd learned about the food industry at that point in time, and like what was going on, and like the environmental impact of food choices. I'm not sure if you're aware of a guy named Michael Pollan and the Omnivore's Dilemma, but I was reading, all sorts of that material. And for a guy who cared a lot about the environment and who was also interested in food, it was like, wow, like why don't more people understand this? I want to do something impactful here. And so a big part of the motivation for that business was to do something, environmentally impactful, right? That was kind of our mission and our cause. What I came to realize after a few years in this is that from our customers' perspective, that really wasn't the problem that we were solving, right? Our products were like beginner level indoor gardening kits. And frankly, like there were a couple of them. The problem that they were solving for customers was that the products were stocking stuffers, right? I need a cool novelty gift to give someone at Christmas time, someone who cares about food or cooking or gardening or whatever. Like this product from Urban Leaf would be a great fit. And to a founder who's, motivated by like big picture environmental clauses to realize that they're now manufacturing stocking stuffers, I was like, really? Really? Is that all I'm doing here? This is not the problem that I wanted to solve. And it just stopped being a problem that I was passionate about once I realized that's how our customers saw me. And that was unbelievably demoralizing, if I can be honest with you. And I really, really struggled to get excited about, solving that problem and those sorts of problems. And I struggled with that for a lot of, a long time. And I don't, I don't think I was really the person to solve that problem or address it in the way it needed to be addressed. So, ultimately decided to do something different.
So how long did it take you from when you first got disillusioned to when you ended up exiting that business?
Mm. Probably a few years. I mean, in between, we had the COVID boom, and we were very much in the case of being in the right place at the right time. I mean, that business went absolutely gangbusters during COVID. We made millions of dollars and did unbelievably well for a period. But when you're staying busy with that, and I'm not saying that that was the only problem we solved. Like there were genuinely other, customer relationships we had. Like we did some stuff with schools and educational sort of stuff. And like when you can get into or partner with a school around an educational program and you're teaching kids about growing food and, the environmental impact of their food choices, it's like, yeah, sure. Okay. This is good. So I don't want to give the impression that, the only thing we were doing is manufacturing stocking stuffers. That wasn't the case. But I'd say a few years all up, but a big part of that was the COVID madness, which was kept us pretty busy for quite a while.
All right. So then you move on, you start your fractional CFO job, right? Company.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the things you had to learn when you started that? I mean, you had the lessons from the e-commerce, but you probably still had a few surprises.
Yeah. Well, I've learned a lot about how founders think about finances and the relationship that they have with finances. And, the right way to get people to open up and, become interested in talking and working with someone like me. I guess the way I see it is that there's generally a spectrum. So the first step is that founders kind of live in this stage, which I call denial about their finances, which is, I don't want to look at it. I don't know. I don't understand it. Don't care. And just don't bother me with this finance and number stuff, right? The problem is that whether or not you look at them, the finances are going to continue to exist and they're going to continue to write a story. It's just whether or not you happen to be paying attention. And for a lot of people, part of the reason for that denial is that the story the finances are telling is different to the story that they want to have in their head. Particularly if it's a purpose-led or mission-driven, founder, they want to tell their family and friends and network that they're building this amazing business and they're, selling great products and so forth. But if at the same time the finances are going, meh, you kind of suck right now, then that can be hard to digest, right? So that's step one. Step two is what I call overwhelm. And this is where we've had a look at the finances and numbers, but we've gotten confused. It doesn't make sense. There's too much information. We don't understand. And we often revert back to phase one. Step three is what I call intrigue. And this is where we kind of start to peer over the fence and go, there's some interesting things going on over there in that financial statement. I don't really understand what it's all about, but I probably should learn. There's probably some things I could, gain from that. The final phase, which is where I'm aiming to get all my clients to, is the enlightenment phase. And at the enlightenment phase, the penny drops. And we're like, now I see what you're saying. Like, now I get why I have a gross profit problem or I'm spending too much on marketing or whatever it is. And at the enlightenment phase, we can start to leverage finances as a strategic ally for growing our business. We can start to use all those numbers and information as a co-pilot to making better decisions. and, concentrating our resources, time, attention, and effort on the problems that really need to be solved in the business. And it, if used effectively in the right way, it can make the whole experience of being a founder and a business owner so much less stressful if you understand the, financial machine that is your business and how money flows into and out of it. And yeah, that's where I'm aiming to get people to. So, every business owner is somewhere on that spectrum, and they have a different level of pain and a different kind of, emotional relationship with the finances and numbers. And understanding where people are at and what it's going to take to move them to the next level is a topic that fascinates me. I could honestly talk about this for days, but yeah, that has been a huge learning for me.
Yeah, it sounds, I mean, looking at both e-commerce or online businesses and offline traditional businesses, most business owners do finance as an afterthought because they have to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. And it's one of the reasons so few businesses get sold by their founders,
Mm-hmm.
because somebody comes in and says, "Hey, I want to buy it." And the books are such a mess that there's just nothing to sell.
Yeah.
So it sounds like that's something that you're helping people understand and clean up.
Sort of. So there's an important line in the sand when it comes to business finances. And that line in the sand is today, right? The people who look at finances before today are called bookkeepers and accountants, and they specialize in categorizing and explaining what's happening in the past.
Right.
What I do is look on the other side of the line, and I help people understand what's coming next. So I need those historical financials to be accurate in order to do my job, because they kind of, they're the starting point for all of the work that I do. But my focus is very much on helping people optimize and plan for the future rather than categorize and explain the past, which is, usually more of a tax/compliance requirement, right?
Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, okay. That is a solid description. So when you sit down with a business owner, you're really advising them on how to use the past to shape their future.
Correct. Yep. Yep.
Okay. And when you talk to, and I'm sure this happens, when you talk to somebody who is thinking about possibly starting a business,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're not really ready to be a client of yours necessarily,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but they know what you do. What are
Yep.
some of the things you give them advice on? What are some of the things that you advise them?
Yeah, so it comes up quite a bit. I actually had a couple of conversations with folks in, just the last week who are doing, $10,000, $20,000 a month, which is a bit early to be bringing someone on like me. What I usually tell people is that you need to be post, or at least towards the end of finding product market fit, in order for it to make sense to bringing someone like me on. You need to have at least somewhat scalable and repeatable ways of acquiring customers and growing your revenue before it makes sense to put money and spend money with someone like me. The reason for that is you cannot finance your way out of a bad product. If
Right.
people don't want to buy your widget, there's no amount of financial analysis and planning and, forecasting that I can do to fix that. You need to have a product that solves a real customer problem and people are willing to pay real money for it. And while you're during that phase of figuring out customer market fit, really the only one or maybe two financial tools you need would be, firstly, an understanding of your unit economics. So you need to know, what am I paying for this product? What does it cost to manufacture? What does it cost to ship? How much am I paying on advertising? Roughly what's my overheads? As long as you understand that unit economic maths, and we can get to a point where, we can see at least some profit left over, then that would be one requirement. The other thing you might do is put together a cash flow forecast, particularly if you're in an inventory heavy business like e-commerce or anything with physical products, where the outlays for inventory can be very, very lumpy. it means that you've got a lot of variability between your cost outlays and what you're bringing in revenue. And so being able to map that out in a cash flow forecast is super helpful. But, I mean, I have YouTube videos and free templates that people can download online to do that stuff. Like, you don't need to pay me thousands of dollars to put those sorts of models together. So I would say go, build a rough version of each of those models yourself. Get to post product market fit, which in my industry is usually like at least 7 figures of revenue. Then come back and see me, because once we've got something that people are buying, they're buying repeatedly, then I can really sink my teeth into this and help you figure out how to scale it.
Yeah, that's all really actually good fundamental advice. And so talked about people having lessons. One of the things that's come up repeatedly is there are 3 pieces of advice that everybody gets, right? When they go to start a business, it's you got to have a good strategic plan, you got to have 6 months of savings, and you have to have a clear understanding of what your clients will actually buy. And, we're 170 episodes in, and I think I've had 2 people that are, oh yeah, I had all 3 of those. And 168 people going, well, my plan was well written. It was just completely inaccurate. And I really didn't know what people were going to buy. So you didn't have product market fit. And I just got fed up and I started the business. I wasn't really financially prepared. So, you're dealing with people that have started the business and now they're trying to figure out how to at least get it stood up to the point where you can help them grow it.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. All right. Any other, I mean, that's a quick 20 minutes, but any other pieces of advice you'd offer to a new business owner?
I think it's important to understand which type of business you are in terms of product push versus customer pull. So what I mean by that is that there are some business founders and operators who have invented a product, right? They've got a widget or they've got a particular thing or service that they want to do. And they're like, I love doing this. I love manufacturing this widget so much that it's going to be my life's work. And their job then becomes to figure out who's the best customer of that widget or that service. And if they're really, really stuck on that widget idea, then they've got a whole lot of work to do in figuring out what is the best place to sell it and who's going to pay the most for it, essentially. The other type of business that you'll come across is people who are less wedded to a product or solution, but they just really want to serve a particular customer. And for me, this is, startup founders. I have a huge amount of respect and admiration for people who are brave enough and bold enough to try to build businesses like this. Like, they're my tribe and I want to support them. And what this approach does is you basically say, hey, I'm kind of flexible on the widget that I actually manufacture. It could be a software, it could be a widget, it could be a service, could be something else. Like, I don't really care. But I really want to work with this customer because I love this customer. I love the idea of waking up and serving them every day. And then your job is to essentially get really close to that customer, understand their problems, understand their needs, and then work backwards into a solution once you've properly understood the problem. Neither of these approaches is right or wrong, but basically every business falls into one of these 2 categories. And I think it's really important for entrepreneurs and business owners to understand which one they are in, because the playbook for growing and developing those businesses is completely different.
Yeah. Yep. That is actually understanding what it is you've got is super important. So, all right. So in the show notes, we're going to have information on how to connect to you. We're going to have link to your YouTube channel, I believe. And we have a whole bunch of information. If somebody's interested in learning more, what's the best way, just real quickly, what's the one best way to contact you?
Through my website, futurereadycfo.com. There's, contact forms there. You can also get a better sense of all the products and services I have. For folks who are earlier stage, I also have a whole lot of, free content, downloads, templates, that sort of stuff. So that would be the one best starting point, I'd say.
All right. Well, thanks for being a guest.
Of course. Thank you for having me. It's been fun. I appreciate
No
it.
problem. And for everybody that's listening, 3 ways you can help us. If you enjoy shows like this, leave a review, hit subscribe, or share an episode. Until next week, we'll be back. Stay focused, keep working, stay profitable.